Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
Good Sunday morning and welcome to All Indiana Politics, everyone. I'm Phil Sanchez. In less than 26 hours, Indiana will officially be under new management. Governor-elect Mike Braun will take the oath of office at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. He's already laid out an elaborate policy agenda. Our government reporter Garrett Bergquist previews what we can expect on property taxes, Medicaid, and other issues.
Mike Braun will be handed the keys to this office on Monday morning, and he's already laid out a very detailed policy plan.
Property taxes were arguably the #1 issue during the campaign. Braun wants to cap year-over-year property tax increases at 2% for seniors, low-income homeowners, and families with children under 18, and 3% for everyone else. He also wants to expand the homestead deduction. In addition, Braun wants to exempt retirement income from taxation and provide a 2-year state income tax credit for anyone who got bumped into a higher bracket due to inflation.
And I think that speaks well for what his administration is going to be, because he's listening to what's out there, what's being said to him by people in the communities. And property taxes has been a top issue. And I think that's why you see a mandate from him to attack this issue and try and solve it or improve it.
On schools, Braun wants universal school vouchers and higher teacher pay. And he's called for, as he puts it, more high-performance school options in areas with low-performing schools. Then there's Medicaid. Braun has called for fundamental reforms to close the funding gap, though he hasn't offered many specifics. He also wants to allow Medicaid users to use program dollars to access direct primary care memberships. And he wants state programs as a whole to focus more on wellness.
The challenge, of course, is that's a longer-term turnaround rate where you'll make the savings that you need to make. And so that'll be the big challenge in the long term. But that's going to be the getting that number right is going to be a big issue here at the legislature. Already getting a significant pushback from a lot of folks who were affected by those proposed changes.
Any governor's agenda ultimately is at the mercy of the General Assembly. John says Braun's background as a state representative and a U.S. senator might help him deal with lawmakers. He says legislators already are signaling a willingness to work with Braun.
There will be disagreements, I have no doubt, because anytime you have two different people addressing hard issues, you'll get two different perspectives. But I think there will be a great deal of cooperation really on a variety of these issues, whether you're talking about workforce development, education, whether you're talking about tax relief.
Tew says Democrats will fight any program cuts that affect the most vulnerable. Both he and John say so far, voters appear to be getting what they saw during the campaign.
I think it's, pretty much what he ran on for governor, and I think he's going to try to implement the things he talked about as governor, and so I don't think there's big surprises there.
Braun has a limited window in which to enact his legislative agenda. The session runs until April 29th at the latest. After that, it will be 2 years before Braun can again shape the all-important state budget.
At the State House, I'm Garrett Bergquist for Wish TV, wishtv.com, or follow us on Facebook for updates.
Meanwhile, the General Assembly is already off and running. Lawmakers gavelled in early Wednesday afternoon. This will be the long session because it's a budget year. Democratic and Republican leaders in the House laid out their goals and expectations for the session. Here's some of what they had to say.
House Democrats are listening to Hoosiers when they say Indiana is getting too expensive for them. We need to address the rising costs of living. Housing costs too much, whether they're talking about rising property taxes or how difficult it is to become a first-time homeowner. We don't need higher property taxes, we need more homeowners. We also need to cut health care costs, lower utility bills, and crack down on junk fees and scams. And when child care costs are stopping people from going to work or buying a home, that's a problem we need to fix. This is about telling Hoosiers that if you live and work in Indiana, you deserve more. You shouldn't need a magnifying glass to read your paycheck. On every vote we take this year, the question we ask ourselves should be, does this help working Hoosiers get ahead? If we're not advancing toward that goal, then what are we doing here?
And there's usually a time or two, I tell my good friend Leader G. Quinn, I can't agree with you on that. But you laid out a lot of things I think we can work together on. I think healthcare is an issue that we have the same focus. Housing, we have the same focus. I think we will have a good year. The one thing I tell people over and over about this place is that we are not Washington, D.C. We don't have the animosity that you just see evident throughout that. I said we can go at each other, and since he's not here, I can use Representative Hatfield as an example, where he would just beat the tar out of me from that podium and then come and shake my hand and say, Layman, you're doing a good job. And you know what? He made me a better legislator. So we need to work together, and I appreciate what you've said. I think some of the things that you wrote down about transparency, the police, fire, EMS, we're on board. We're on board. And I think the one thing you said was, every question should be, does this help working Hoosiers get ahead? And I think we all agree we want to do what's right for every Hoosier in this state.
All right, and we already have our first flashpoint this session. A state lawmaker wants to dissolve Indianapolis Public Schools and convert all of its schools to charter schools. Now, the bill would do that to any public school corporation where at least half of the students who live within its boundaries attend a school other than a traditional public school. That includes charter schools and private schools. State analysts say 5 school corporations meet that description. They include IPS and Gary Community Schools. We caught up with the bill's author on the first day of the session.
What do we do about districts where 50% or more of the families that legally reside in those districts are choosing another option? And those are districts that we would say clearly, the governance structure is failing those students. And so, what do we do as a state to help those families and the folks that live in those areas to have high quality options?
My own child came home from school for high school in IPS, a district that she's been a part of for 11 years, worried about whether or not her school would exist next year. The kids in her classroom at the cafeteria table were talking about this. That is not the way to negotiate in good faith, and that's not how we do legislation here in Indiana.
Now, Teshka says that he's open to something short of dissolving IPS. He says it depends on what other solutions IPS proposes. Well, the Senate caucuses also have laid out their priorities. Senate Republicans have said that they will introduce Braun's tax plan as Senate Bill 1. That indicates first priority. They also plan to limit eligibility for the Healthy Indiana Plan and introduce work requirements that will be a bill to require health plan intermediaries to act in their clients' best interests. And there's a proposal to require permits for pipelines meant for large water projects. Now, Senate Democrats, meanwhile, want to make doula services for pregnant women eligible for Medicaid. They propose raising minimum teacher salaries to $65,000 a year. They also want to strengthen renter protections and require landlords to provide renters 60 days notice before they sell their properties. Coming up, some legislation is already moving at the State House. We'll tell you about a measure to require parental permission if your kids want to use social media. Welcome back. Some legislation is already moving at the State House. Lawmakers have already heard a bill that would mandate parental permission for kids under the age of 16 to access social media. Our Kat Sandoval spoke with the state senator who introduced that bill.
Primary cause for death in young adults under the age of 16 is sadly suicide. And when you look at a lot of the data, much of it correlates with a real increase in the uptake of social media and the amount of time they spend on the screens.
If the bill becomes law, social media companies will have to get verifiable parental or guardian consent for those 15 years and under, or pay a fine of $250,000 for each violation.
The bill is in its early stages. We had a hearing yesterday. There's going to be some amendments to try to clean up some of the language, to make it very specific and to make sure that we're hitting the right pieces of social media.
The bill pits safety of minors against free speech.
Under our state and federal constitution, we have First Amendment rights both to speak and also to consume speech. Social media platforms are one way that we do that here in modern times. And the courts continue to say that minors have a right both to use those platforms to speak and to consume speech.
There are laws that already protect minors from sexually explicit materials online, and other states like Florida and Tennessee have also enacted age-based social media bans, like what is being proposed in Indiana. However, those are currently being challenged in court.
These social media platforms have a lot of influence on our nation, and it's one thing when they're influencing fully functioning adults, but it's another thing when they're trying to influence young minds that are not maybe in the best position to make rational decisions.
Senator Bohacek says he's confident it'll pass.
Will we capture 100% compliance? Of course not. No law does that. But we got to start. And this is a great start.
If the bill passes, the law goes into effect July. Reporting in Indianapolis, I'm IT Mate's Kat Sandoval, Wish TV, wishtv.com, or follow us on Facebook for updates.
All right, coming up, Indiana's best political team looks ahead to the inauguration of Mike Braun and takes stock of the first week of the session. All right, welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two members of Indiana's best political team, Republican Allie Bartlett and Democrat Dana Black. Let's begin by looking ahead to Mike Braun's inauguration tomorrow. Allie, we'll start with you. We went over Braun's plans earlier in the show, so which are most interesting in your opinion?
Yeah, you broke up for a second there, Phil, but I think you asked about his policy proposals.
Yes.
Which are the most interesting. I think all eyes will be on his proposals around property taxes and just helping to save some of those dollars for Hoosiers. We heard in the interview just before now that Mike Braun is being directly responsive to the issues he heard on the campaign trail will be most important to Hoosiers, and that's what he's prioritizing. And I think that says a lot about who he is going to be as our next governor. So I'm really excited to see what comes out of that. I think in general, I'm just excited to see such a positive working relationship between Mike Braun and the legislature. He comes from the legislature. He served as U.S. Senate. He knows what it's like to be in their shoes. And so I think we're going to see a lot of positive momentum in general for the state because of that productive partnership.
So, Dana, some of Braun's proposals are similar to what Democrats have been demanding for years. That includes higher teacher pay. Do you see anything on this agenda that Democrats could get behind?
Yeah, I believe the higher teacher pay is definitely one of them, but already we're seeing where the legislature is actually attacking and not supporting teachers in a way that they should, especially when you talk about dissolving whole public school systems. I don't think that is about supporting teachers, especially if they are already unionized, because every profession has the right to unionize. Also, I think it's problematic that they're writing legislation to literally attack Black, brown, and low-income communities and say, well, we believe in school choice, but we're going to take one of the choices away from you. Mm-hmm. I do hope that Mike Braun can talk to his colleagues in the State House and they can go back to focusing on how we can deal with property taxes and quality of life issues. But it doesn't appear that way as they begin to write legislation. And as the story pointed out, how Braun's policies go will go how the General Assembly goes.
Yeah, I want to get Allie in here on that because that's an interesting proposal, Allie. What do you make of it?
Yeah, so I think in general, what we've heard is that the Braun team and the Braun administration, as well as the legislature, are focused on good developments in the education space. And like we have been for years, prioritizing choice for students and parents across the state of Indiana, but at the same time, also prioritizing quality of educational options. I think they're trying to get creative and make sure that we are delivering for all Hoosier students because, as Mike Braun has said again and again publicly, students and education and workforce development are the future of the state of Indiana. And so we're doing whatever we can on the Republican side to present options because we know that kids are not all the same. That's why we prioritize this concept of school choice to support all students and parents across the state of Indiana to make the best outcomes possible for the state.
This ain't about school choice, because if it was about school choice, you wouldn't take away one of the options forcibly. Second, where was the proposal that said that if 50% of students don't go to charter schools, the charters will be shut down? This is a money grab. This is about redistribution of wealth, because if it was really about choice, you wouldn't take any of the options away for parents to choose from. We heard from a parent who said, hey, my child has been in IPS for the last 11 years, and she is worried about where she will be going to school. This is insane. I think this is and how about the fact that it would also dissolve the elected school board, and and schools would be going to charter. So basically, you're taking away local control once again.
Yeah, well,
I really wish the State House would get out of Indianapolis politics, get out of these schools, get out of these Black and brown communities, and allow them to do for themselves. I don't understand how taking away one of the options is about school choice.
There. Let's look ahead to the inauguration day tomorrow. This is for both of you. What will you be listening for in Braun's remarks? Dana, you first on that one.
Well, I imagine he's going to say what he's been saying all the past 18 months. I don't anticipate him coming up with anything new. He's going to talk about his tax relief. He's going to talk about having a leaner government. He's going to talk about all the things that he's been talking about. But I know what he won't talk about. I know he won't talk about raising the minimum wage. I know he won't talk about how we can address some of the police reform that we need to address. I know there are a lot of things that he won't be talking. He won't talk about the needs of Black and brown communities. I know he won't be talking about that.
Allie, what will you be listening for?
I'm going to be listening for all of the, good proposals, like Dana said, that Mike Braun has been talking about since his time on the campaign trail, because one thing we can probably all agree on is that he has stayed very committed to the messages that he put forth on the campaign trail, which I think says a lot about him. He's consistent and he means what he says. He's going to keep his promises to Hoosiers and fight for them. And so I'm really excited to hear about his thoughts on, what this first session is going to look like for him. And just his first, few months in office. He's got a fantastic team surrounding him. We've seen more coming out about his various appointments. He's already keeping his promise to try and create more efficiency within Indiana's government, and he's taking that so seriously. And so I'm so excited to see about what he really is going to be focused on personally. We know what his policy priorities will be, but just excited to hear about how those will be implemented in these first few months.
Let's turn back to the legislative session for a moment, shall we? We just heard about a bill to ban minors from using social media without parental permission. It's already getting some public hearings. Allie, is this even enforceable?
Yeah, so actually, I think as we heard coming out of the committee hearing this week, there are some intended amendments already to this bill, and they are intended to make sure that they're addressing any concerns. Look, the bottom line for this bill is what Senator Braun, I think, said in one of her comments on the bill, which is that they're trying to equip parents with additional tools in their toolbox. They're not trying to restrict content. That is where a First Amendment concern could come in. They're not trying to restrict content on these websites. They're trying to restrict the concept of social media in general for children. So this is not the same thing as trying to restrict content where we could raise a First Amendment concern in that way. They're trying to give parents more tools to make sure that they're supporting their children the best way they can.
Dana, there's growing research, as you very well know, that does suggest that social media plays at least some role in children's mental health. Should there be tougher guardrails in place?
I agree with everything Allie said when it comes to empowering parents to make sure they know what their children are doing. But I would like to see our legislature take it a little bit further. Just like they said that sometimes social media can lead to negative outcomes and suicide rates, so can picking on members of our community. So when they introduce new anti-trans legislation, do they not understand the mental anguish that it puts on young people? And we already know the suicide rates in the LGBTQ plus community are much higher than all the other demographics combined. So I would like to see, yes, continue to look at social media as a way to give the parents tools that they need, but why not extend that to everything and stop attacking the most marginalized people from our government that creates a lot of anguish, a lot of mental stress to young people who are in the LGBTQ plus community.
When it comes to the social media aspect, ladies, I want to just quickly obviously I'm a parent. My oldest is 14. This might be hard to enforce too, though, don't you think? Dana, 30 seconds quickly.
It will be, but it will be up to the, this is one of those instances where, if they can't get in, hey, parent, will you help me? I mean, a kid, if there's a way to get around it, the kid's going to figure it out. They're smarter than us in tech anyway.
I know they are. Allie, quickly.
Yeah, and you know what? They addressed that in the committee hearing. They know this is not going to be perfect, but all they're trying to do is equip parents with additional tools to try and help some of that. All they're asking of these companies is that the companies make some effort to put something in place that would be an age verification method. It's tough. They realize it's not going to be a perfect outcome.
All right, well, we're out of time, unfortunately. And every little bit helps, right? Good to see you both. Thank you so much. We'll be right back. thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30, and make sure to tune in tomorrow morning for our special coverage of the inauguration of Mike Braun, featuring Indiana's best political team. Have a great rest of your weekend.